Hey team, this is week 28 and today we're drawing another very light flower, which I don't know if I've ever seen before, but it's a really good one to try. The difference with this one is we're not going to do any sort of structure or guide to help us draw it. We're going to try and draw it freehand without any measurements, any construct lines, and seeing how we get on with a flower that essentially swirls around each other and each petal sits on top of the other. So the difficult thing in this is trying to make sure that your petals are very similar sizes as they rotate around the center and they end with all 5 petals like a star in an even-ish kind of size and manner. So grab your 2B and let's get started. Okay, we're getting pretty good at drawing now, folks. So instead of us having a guide to draw our petals, I actually want us to draw it freehand. So we don't have any grids, we don't have any construction lines. We're literally going to go petal by petal and seeing how one overlaps the other. So this is a bit of a spiral as a flower, and luckily in the center there is no high pollen sort of thing. It's all about the shading and the shape. So all I want you to do is try and get the 5 petal leaves by overlapping them, doing a long line on one side and a short line on the other, and then doing your next petal. So you're going to be looking for the flower being fairly equal when it comes to individual petals, and make sure it's not a square flower, it's kind of a circle. So take your time on this, get your outline, and you're going to feel very bloody proud of yourself afterwards. Next, you're going to add these little foldy bits. So just on the left hand side there's a little bit of an overlap, so you just pop those in, and then we're going to start our shading. So we do get into it fairly quickly, but you might spend a bit more time in your outline, and it is worth spending that extra time making sure you're happy with how it twists. So with the shading, we're going to try and knock off a lot of the white, and we're going to use our 2B pencil. So we're just taking it nice and gentle, not going too dark because it is a white flower, but white still has shade. So we just want to gently put a little bit of shading on there, just all over, and then we're going to start to push the dark a bit. So this bit should be fairly straightforward and quite stress-free, hopefully. So you just want to try and get it as even as possible. You might be tempted to smudge. Please don't. We're trying so hard not to smudge. So yeah, just do what you can. Put everything in practice, what you've learned. So you should have your super smooth base now. So it's time to push things a little bit darker. Hopefully you've avoided any distraction of detail. Often we kind of just want to do that straight away, but this is a much more effective way of drawing. So grab your 8B and let's start noticing where the detail is, but don't make it too dark. So the darkest part of this flower is in the middle, because that's where the leaves are heading towards, and that's where we have the deepest part of the bend. So they all go into the middle, but also you've got those little folds on the edges. What you're looking for on this drawing is where the darkness comes out with the leaf, the petal, sorry, and where it falls into lightness. So you have to keep looking at the image on this one. You can't avoid it. You need to see the subtle differences in curve for each petal, and you're seeing where the light source is. So it's actually coming from the left hand side, which means there will be shadows cast on the right hand side, and there will be lighter bits on the left hand side. So take each petal as it comes and look for those gradients. So there's hardly any harsh edges here. There's only sharp edges on literally the outline of the flower, but also on those mini folds on the edges of the petals. Now, a little tip on your outline, actually. Some of you might have pressed really hard on your outline, and I would recommend just to use your rubber and dab it out if you can see it. On this drawing, we don't want to see too much of an outline because it can become quite distracting and almost like a cartoon. But if there is shading there, if there is a shadow there, you can blend the outline in with the rest of the detail. So work along your petals now, trying to get the details in the curves, and then we'll add the center in just a second. So we're looking at that yellow part now. Yellow is a very light color and it's only just darker than the white, but remember we had that artistic license from our last lesson. We are actually going to push this a bit darker because I think it looks a lot more interesting. Seeing high contrast is way more interesting to our eyes. So we're going to gently go around the circle and just avoiding those little half folds, and you'll notice that it's more intense in the dead center of the flower, and it's a nice gradient towards the white just after that. So we want to make sure that we're softening our edges, and then also just having another look at any of the detail on the petals. So as we put more pencil on the paper, you're going to start noticing that the first petal you were doing is actually a lot lighter when it's surrounded by dark, rather than when you put that first bit of pencil on there, because when you start with pencil it looks really dark, it's just surrounded by white, but actually we need to make sure it is dark enough. So this is the time to really play around with tone on this drawing. And just a very quick one, folks, if you do enjoy these videos and find them useful, head on over to Patreon, where you can support me for just £3 a month and get extra content as well. Fancy. So keep going around trying to see where it's darker, and usually it's definitely coming from the center, and then as it bends around it comes to a really light patch. So don't forget, after you've done your detail with your 8B, head on over, start using your 2H to really refine the drawing, get rid of that grainy effect, those streaky parts, and just use that 2H to really get in the nooks and crannies, and it's going to look bloody lovely. Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next week for another flower.